Good evening, everyone. We're going to start out as we kind of normally do. This is normally behind the scenes, but we're going to start out tonight. We're going to sharpen things up that we're going to need for this project. This project is pink. It will be a lidded box. So it will. So we need some things sharpened. Just thinking here what all we need. Bow guides, parting tool. I think that's and may need a round nose scraper too. So let's head over to the grinder and we'll get some things sharpened up. And then we'll make some chips. We should have the business end of them all headed the same direction, but we don't. So we'll try not to make any blood fly. So we know we got to do parting tools. I can cheat on that one. That I have a gauge for. That'll also do my negative rake scraper. That's parting tool. Might as well do this one official like. Because the problem lies in when I do some of this stuff during the week and I'm not doing it live. A lot of times a parting tool, I just come over and freehand sharpen them. Eventually you can get them relatively far out of whack. Of course, that depends on what you need to do with them. So that's that one, and we probably will need this negative rake. But just make sure it has a burr on it. Nice big fat burr. Working on learning how to use the traditional scrapers as well, so I'm kind of a little hesitant to grind too much away on that one. Because I'm thinking what I'm probably going to end up doing with this one, and there's one or two other ones that are the same way that I have. I'll probably just keep grinding strictly on one side till I get it back in here and actually can make it back into a traditional scraper rather than a negative rake scraper. So I might as well. I'm going to have to turn the grinder off to do the other couple scrapers I have because I got to reset the platform. But we can do. Should have done the bowl gouge first because it's set for the bowl gouge. That makes sense. Not sure whether I'll probably use the bowl gouge to make it round. Or we'll use the spindle roughing gouge either way. This is the one that's short. So it's not going across the flutes, it's actually in behind the flute. That does have a V block on it, but I'm just sort of one of these deals where you just sort of eyeball it. It's not that super tight in the jig, and I can turn it a little bit. Otherwise, I'm not getting it in the same. It's not getting into the jig the same way every time. So it means I have to do a little extra grinding each time, which is okay. Because I want this one to wear out so I can use the rest of the bar for something other than a bowl gouge. Because I have good bowl gouges for the most part to do my work. Or I should say better bowl gouges. I shouldn't say good and bad. That one there is a Sorby. But I will definitely take my Thompson bowl gouge over that Sorby any day of the week. The Thompson will stay sharper probably 3 times longer. Once again, this one is getting short too. Mm. Yeah, I had that one right the first time, but it somehow or another looked like things were out of whack on it. So this will take a bit more grinding. If there's a downfall of having a very fine CBN wheel, this is one of them. That if you need to change a little bit of a profile on something, it takes a whole lot more to do it because it's taking off so very little material. And we got that. This one I get rid of a lot of the heel. I want a very, very short bevel. I want to be able to get into very fine detail work with it. So the bevel has a tendency to get in the road. Also went too far around on the grinder. Two different places. Shoot. I should have ground the heel back before I did the rest of it. Because I rolled the grinder around and I got places where I went up over the top of where I had it sharp. So that also just became a place that's no longer sharp. And we went way over it, no less. Good enough for now. Unfortunately, we need to wait for the grinder to stop. Use my trusty little block of wood. It's putting some fairly nice scratches in the side of the grinding wheel, but it's not going to affect how it works, so I'm not really concerned about it. This is my little tool that will do the recess in the lid. Well, if I spin the wheel by hand, should be able to see how far off I am, which fairly far off. It is a negative rake. It doesn't really make a whole huge difference. And we're going to get to do this maneuver a couple different times, actually. Just to raise a burr on it. And straighten up the front end. And then we will get to do this again, because this is nowhere near This one here is actually a piece of steel that right from Amazon. It's just high-speed steel for that one. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, which is kind of the beauty of them. So if you want to play around making some scrapers and things like that, it's really a pretty economical way of doing it. And this one is more of the, this is a traditional scraper. This one here is a Thompson scraper. Has Jimmy Clues' name on it. Very good scraper, very heavy. Does a really a good job. So I think that's everything. So now we can make a bit of a mess. So we can come back over here. And then we'll put some of this stuff in the handles. What needs to be in handles. But I like the short handled spindle gouge. So this handle's only about 8 inches long. And it's drilled almost the whole way to the bottom, so I can put the shaft of the tool way in there. Just makes it, as far as I'm concerned, it makes it easier to do some of the nice fine detail work that I will want to do. The tool's always in front of me instead of having to sort of maneuver my body around the tool. So I'll get a couple of these that can be in the handles, or needs to be in a handle. Put them in the handles, and then we'll be ready. And I'm sure I probably forgot to sharpen something, but if anything, it'll just be like the spindle roughing gouge I didn't sharpen. I'll just use the bowl gouge to make this round. Just as easy. Especially if you're somebody who's just maybe starting out in this illustrious career. Just one less, really it's one less tool you need to buy. Because all the tools are fairly expensive. Can be fairly expensive, put it that way. So if you don't have to buy a ton, then you might as well save a little bit of money here and there if you can. And the big spindle gouge parting tool. That should be pretty much everything, I think. So we get our smock on. Helps to keep the chips down here in my shop rather than in the upstairs living part, because I don't want to have to run the sweeper. And we should be able to get away with short tool rest all the way around. And we won't need the big duck either. This is kind of like some of the things that happen for me during the week if I come down here and mess around a bit, which I have been doing more of, because it is craft show season. So my wife made some trees that are made with some wool material, and they all needed little bases for the tree. So I've been making bases a couple days this week. That's when you get to work my work days have shortened up compared to what they were a little bit. It's still around 9.5 hours. A couple days this week it was longer than that, but a couple days it got closer to 11. But those days we don't do anything. Come home and sit down and relax or whatever. Because for us, we were at a craft show today, and we have 2 more to go. At least as far as I know, we have 2 more to go. Just kind of like a bowl, like I would do a bowl. I'm standing off to the side to bring the speed up. I'm going to bring these up pretty quick. This is a pretty close to being square block. We'll just kind of nibble it off. Once again, I'm using my bowl gouge. And I'll pick it up to readjust the cut. Make sure the mic goes down where it belongs. I slide back on the bevel. Drops over the end. Go forward. As you can see, it's pretty quick. There's a stab center that's driving it, so any little movement away from them and they don't want to drive. I can look at the end of the piece and I can still see that I need about another 1/4 of an inch maybe. This time I go in and I will go across a little bit. And as you see, let me get something off my screen because I can't see what I'm doing up here. There we go. Guess since we're doing something so small, we can move in a bit. And we're not quite round yet. Go just a little bit more. I'm not worried about, really totally worried about it being perfectly round at this point. Just have one little flat area. But if I use my bowl gouge up on its wing, it's basically almost like a skew. It's a slicing cut. It'll give me a pretty good surface. It is pink. A little bit of disturbed grain there for some reason. This stuff here is definitely different to work with by virtue of it is just it's laminated wood, but I'm sure that they do not concern themselves with the grain direction going all in one direction. It's not a plywood. If the grain there's no grain going across, it's all going in the same direction. But if you do enough woodworking over the years, you notice that, that one I can see is going that direction. the grain would be going in this direction, that way. So if we go around to the other side, I would say that one is actually going in that direction. So that means any of these places that you aren't very kind to it, it can just tear things up a little bit. Not that you're overly interested in that useful, worthless knowledge. Leave myself about an inch for the lid. It's going to leave me about 2 inches, 2¼ for the base, so that should be all right. So we know where our lid's going to be. We need tenants on both ends of this to grab it in the chuck. We'll use a parting tool. It's already grounded at an angle. Not really concerned about making a tenant that's going to be super duper the right size for the chuck, because it is a very small piece. And I'll use the small stuff is dusty though. The only thing wrong, that's one of the things that are kind of wrong with this material. It is very dusty. I'll just go ahead and part the lid off, or at least part down. I get it relatively small. It's always best to shy on the side of too thick right there, because running a parting tool in, if these two pieces were to break apart, you would cut through the middle, they're going to fly. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, and we don't need to have things flying. Not when you take 30 seconds to cut through it with a flush trimming saw or a Japanese saw. And as you can see, you see what it did right there, even cutting through it, and I released some of the pressure. So if I was running at full speed and that did that, those two pieces are going to bind and it will be less than exciting. It does make pretty chips though, I will give it that. I'm sure when I go back to work this week, or go back to work, well, Monday I might see him. The guy that takes my chips, I've been doing a bunch of pepper mills out of this same type of material, so the chips were very colorful. A lot of them. And I think I've given him some before with those chips in it. So we're going to start with our lid. We're basically done with the tailstock. Everything else is done on the chuck. We'll slide that the whole way to the end, out of the road, lock it in place. So if there's any vibration, I don't want it falling off the end. So this would make, let's look at something, see whether this will make more sense strictly on the end. And probably so. So we'll go to the end view and see what we're doing. Even though there'll be enough time that my hand will be in the road a little bit, but so first order of business is going to be to clean up this end because it's rather rough. I just use my spindle gouge and make a nice little light slicing cut across. Right across the middle. And now we're going to give this a somewhat of a shape because I need a little bit of the shape done to know. Trying to think whether this tool rests. So I thought it's a little. I moved the collars on these for other stuff. Felt like it was a little low. I just want to give these a little bit of a cove. Stop about there. So this wants to be a bead out here. And then runs down into that corner. Come back and make a clean cut into the corner. It needs to be cut nice and clean down into that corner because that's kind of like almost in the no man's land of where you can even sand. That's our bead. A little bit of sanding on the bead will make it more of a perfect bead. A lot of times I will use the beading tools for that. That way I get a more kind of perfect bead. The only thing that we need to really sort of need to be aware of now is that now we have a difference here thickness wise, so I need to know where that is on the inside so that we don't make the lid too small. So we're out in this area here, so we definitely want to come in into that area somewhere thereabouts. We'll find out once we start cutting on it, but somewhere thereabouts a little bit. So now we can get rid of more of the middle. Get rid of a lot of it with just the spindle gouge. And then from there we will go to one of the mini scrapers. Because this is now cutting, I can't really cut straight in because I'm actually cutting right directly into end grain right there. So now we'll set up I use that one. It's been quite some time since I actually used this one for something along this lines, but this one works really, really well for this because it is thicker. It has a big long handle on it to go with it. Move the tool rest over a little bit. I want the post as much over the center as what I can get. And then we'll continue to hollow this out. And that tool rest is actually, in order to do that rim, at least the way I want to do that rim, I'm going to have to either use the other tool, which is probably what I'll do, and cheat. Because what's happening, this is thick. This is 3/8 of an inch thick. When I get over here to the rim, the bottom of this tool is actually hitting down below it. I could still use it, I would have to raise the tool rest up to get up in here to make that cut, which would be actually sort of too high for the what's below it, if that makes sense. Right now I'm more interested in checking to see where we're at depth wise. I don't think I'm not very far in. I'm not trying to make the lid to be thin. It's sort of a nice traditional scraper. It needs to be at a down angle. The down angle does not need to be, it doesn't need to be way up in the air, just a couple degrees. It'll let you know in a very unfriendly way. If you were to get this in here and tilt the handle down to where this cutting edge is sort of pointing up in the air, it will let you know in one big happy hurry. And believe me, it is not friendly when it does it. So I go back to this one. This is a negative rake one. Do need to use the 2 handle. That's actually what that tool there, this tool here, is made to do. Is do the shoulder on a lidded box. If you've ever watched Cindy Drozda on any of hers, she has this. She actually sells one. But I'm kind of I guess you want to call it a cheap ass. That tool right there to buy it in a Thompson from her is pretty much $100, especially with shipping included. Where I made my own with maybe lesser, it's definitely lesser steel than what the Thompson would be. That's also why I ground this up here. This isn't 90 degrees across here. This slopes back so that when I get into that corner, I don't grab a hold of that whole edge, because then it could become aggressive and grab a hold of it. And we don't want to do that. So it left me a tiny little flat there and a little bit of a dome shape on the inside. Now the hard part of trying to figure out whether, I think we can go a little bit wider than that. I'll just do it in little bites. And then we'll clean up the whole thing. And I'm trying to be right over top of my tool as far as where I'm looking at, so that I can see whether this edge is going in straight. Because I want this recess to be pretty much as straight as I can possibly make it. Couple ways to throw things around. We can take a little straight edge in here and put it on that shoulder and find out. Our eye is not as straight as what it looks to be, because we should be over in about there. So kind of tilting things a little bit. It'll just make it easier to fit the lid later on if I take the time to get it. Could use a little bit more yet. That actually does a very nice job on these on the side walls of this for me. Looks relatively straight. Almost looks like I could actually use a tiny
Man. One of these days I'm going to make a little something to hold the stupid pencils up there. I just have a little shelf right there. And those pencils just do not like to stay there. So I think that should be good. Now, I coulda, shoulda. You can do it with this one. I need to taper this a little bit. Not a lot. That way, if I give it a little taper in there, that way this will always sit flat on the rim of the lid, the rim of the box. So now I can go back with this one and clean up a little bit more of that, and it'll be ready to sand and finish on the inside of that. That's kind of the wonders of making lidded boxes. There's a fair amount of parting around with doing finished piece, so to speak. I'll leave just a tiny little flat out there.
I probably really wouldn't even have to leave any flat, but it's just, I don't know, it's just something I've kind of always done with them. So that would be that for that part. I a lot of times cheat on them. I'm going to turn the dust collector on to do it. Because the base, this little base down in here is kind of hard to sand. I do have little 1-inch drums, disc sander, I guess you would call it. But I find it to be sort of just as easy to do it with sandpaper. At least usually. I can fold the sandpaper over and make it smaller yet. Make it flexible. Slow our speed way down compared to where we're at. Of course, the very hardest part is the very dead center. I should knock that edge over a little bit. Just by virtue of my fingers right there at it. If I don't take the sharp edge off of that, instead of this being pink, it could end up being red. So that was 220 that I started with. So we'll go up to the grits. And you notice I did not touch that yet. I won't touch that till I get to maybe 400 or 600. Because I don't want to change the profile. I could have been sanding out here though. The scraper actually leaves a clean enough surface. That's 400 that I just hit that with. And now I'll go in here and do a little bit of this rim recess. Need some fresh 6 and 800 paper though. I wasn't thinking quite right. I should have been sanding this bead right along with everything else. A little easier to be able to finish it later if I have that sanded, or at least part of it sanded. Okay. I'm just going to leave that dust collector run. You let me know if it gets to be too much. Noise cancellation should take care of it, but it also has a tendency to distort my voice a little bit. Like I said, this stuff's very dusty, and we're going to hollow on the next one, so on the next part of it. This we're going to finish with the Parfix 3460, which is a slow setting CA glue. I'm going to run the lathe as absolutely slow as what it will go on this belt, which is about 140 RPMs. This bottle here is about empty. Put a nice liberal coat in there, and I'll come at least halfway around that bead. The reason I use a 3460 on this stuff, especially, this stuff is like a sponge. It's actually kind of hard to finish, but the 3460 does an outstanding job, I think, finishing this stuff. For one, it gives you a little bit more time to do it, because this has more like about a 50-second, 45 to 50-second time delay before it starts to set up. And this stuff is very dry, so there's no real moisture to it. Just like the other ones, we'll wipe off the excess. It works the same as the 3408 as far as finishing with it. You're going to put a liberal amount on, wipe off the excess. This one here, if you wanted the super high gloss shine like most people do with their pens, this is the one to do that with. I could go back over this and put a second, third, fourth, fifth. You know, want to put 20 coats on, you can put 20 coats on. I just don't feel that I don't have a need for it. If I do pens, I will use that stuff. And a lot of times with the pens, unless I want the super, super high gloss shine, I put one coat on a pen and be done. Because when you buff it, it gives you a nice shine. It's just not a plastic look like it would if you put multiple coats on it. I am going to use an accelerator on it. Just by virtue of we want to get done tonight. This will be a complete project, hopefully. So that's our lid, complete so far as we can get it. As you can see, it's pink. It's not hot pink. I guess you would say. But it is pink. And our craft show next weekend is, the theme is pink. Around here there's a thing called Pink Hands of Hope, which helps cancer victims. Hopefully that's not too bad. Yeah, it should work. Let's see what we're doing. Just like with the lid, we're going to face it off. And then we're going to need the size of our inside of our lid so that we can come back with our parting tool. But I didn't put it away. Didn't think I did. So we'll take our calipers and we'll go back to our lid. And I'll set our calipers to the inside of our lid. And we're going to need that, so I'll just leave it over here. There's a couple of ways to do that. I could actually just mark it. I don't necessarily like to do that. These calipers here are probably like El Cheapo Harbor Freight ones. They really don't leave a good mark, for one. And they're a little bit harder to so somewhere down about there. Could even take our pencil and blacken that in a little bit to know about where we need to go. We'll make a parting cut, 1/8" parting tool. I'll get down close to that line, and then I'll roll it over on its edge a little bit. That gave me a taper down into there. Ugh. As you can see, we don't fit. Not really even close to fitting. So I'll square it back up and make it a taper again. And we're still not down to our line, so chances are no fit, which is good. I usually have a tendency to get them too small right off the bat, so really all about being patient. Which I'm not necessarily that good at. So right there, it's starting to go over. It goes over about halfway, which means that taper, it's sitting back in here. So if I actually, the tenon needs to be longer, so I'm going to make it longer right off the bat. Ideally, what I would like to do right now is to get it just to go over that and fit tightly, snugly. Shouldn't say tightly. I don't want to break, I don't want to crack the lid in half. But I also would like it to fit tight enough to be able to finish turning the lid and then loosen it up. I gave it a smack, it probably would fit on there. Let me go back, and it's mainly back here in the back. Tiny little bit. That's going to be good enough. I'll readjust it a little bit once we hollow it out, because I don't want to hollow
I don't want to make this, I mean, right there, I'm sure I could force it on. I also have super glue in there that's probably not totally set up. So I don't want to smack it on. And what happens, it doesn't do it so much with this stuff because this stuff is so dry. But if I was doing that out of a normal piece of wood that maybe I've air dried or what have you, what can happen is when we relieve the stresses in the wood inside of there, it can do some interesting things to you. There, it fits. Snug enough fit that I could actually turn on that. I still need to live center a little bit, but this also gives me an opportunity. I can take my trusty little pencil and go right in here. It's a mechanical pencil, so I'm not marking the edge of the base. So now we can make this into a shape, and I usually just do these sort of a bit of a barrel shape, I guess you would say. So I'm going to mark a center point, center line. Get rid of my glow. I don't need that anymore. This is also a place where I should have made that tenon down there a little bit smaller. That means now I'm going to be getting rather close to the edge of the tenon. Now we'll go back to our spindle gouge. Here's actually where I could use the bigger spindle gouge. Not that it really makes a whole lot of difference, but and well, basically we're just rolling a nice sort of big fat bead. And at this point, it would probably make more sense to be overhead. So let's go back to the overhead. Wouldn't make much sense looking from the other way. My apologies. So we'll do some of the base with some of the bottom. Just have to be a little bit more careful because the chuck jaws are right there. We don't want to hit down. So I can leave the material there. I don't need to worry about it. Just get a general shape for the bottom. Because once we get to that point, I will actually make a little jam chuck that this end will slide into a jam chuck, and then I can totally finish off the bottom, free of any obstructions. So that we want to make that go down in a little bit further. That's why I stopped to look. You can pretty much make these whatever shape that suits you. Looks like that's pretty much far enough down in. The other thing I'm going to do, we didn't do anything with that face earlier. Could have, should have, maybe. I'm going to come back in and I'll make just a nice little light cut right down into that corner. That corner has a little taper down into there. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. So now as I spin it around, once again, I made this, the lid is heading inward. This is also heading inward. So the only place this lid is making contact would be out here on this very outside edge. That's kind of like box making 101 from many years ago. I really should have done a better job on that tenon down there and made it, wasn't thinking along the right lines. But I'm about 1/8 of an inch away from the chuck now. That's okay. We'll take a little bit more from this point down into there. And this is where it becomes a visualization, sort of. That's where it's going to end up at. Get rid of them fuzzies. Fuzzies have a tendency, in this, especially in this material, they would be kind of sharp. Yeah, it looks better. Like I said, I can readjust that part sort of at a later date. Really doesn't help to have the dust collector running, not the right chute open. Doesn't do a very good job that way. Forgot I was running the joiner yesterday, and so now we get to hollow all this out. Couple ways of doing that. A little too low. And go back to our end view. So our spindle gouge will act like a drill, and will literally drill right straight down through the middle of it. Don't necessarily always use the bigger one, because the bigger one likes to chatter for some reason there. I'm literally pushing down the center, coming over to the side. As you see, it's very, very quick. except when you get down in there too far. And you really can't necessarily see. I can't necessarily see what I was doing. And right there, when I went in, because it actually drills quite quickly, it almost actually act like that little bit of a snatcheroonie it did. I was gonna say it tried to yank it out. I think my tool rest is just a hair on the low side, so I was below center in there, which doesn't necessarily cooperate really well. So we can see where we're at, not very far. I'm going to clean up a little bit out here, but that definitely was not running very true. To be a little bit more gentle. And this really is mainly doing things by feel. I can feel where the center is at, the tip of the tool. So when I push in, I'm just pushing in just a little bit. And then pulling the tool to the side. If I don't get in the center, it kind of leave a nub down there, which I did. Also likes to squeal because you're adding a considerable amount of pressure down onto the tool in that deep. Now we went down about another 3/8 of an inch or so. We still have more to go. I'll tell you what would. You could also really cheat on this. It's been a while since I made boxes. I forgot I acquired some tools over the years here that would make this a very simple, much simpler process. I can go back to my big hollowing tools and clean that out quickly. Sort of maybe a little bit overkill for such a small thing, but kind of like time is money. So I'm gonna back the tool rest up a little bit. Probably gotta have to reset the tool rest to get where I need to be. This one definitely wants to be on center, cutting on center with the tool level. That should do it. I also have to stop a little bit more often with that because that one I know does remove a lot of material in a hurry. And I'm basically still drilling a hole down the middle. And we don't want to make a funnel box. So we're down about there. We get down just a little bit. We get down just another 1/8 of an inch or so, maybe 1/4 of an inch. We're down to probably about half an inch, 5/8 of an inch wall.
Sort of like doing a hollow form. Get a lot of time spent cleaning out the shavings. Okay, that's all we're going to do with that one. Because I have other tools that'd be a little bit easier to get in there. I don't think I do have a big bent one for that. We might try that once. I don't think this one will do what I want it to do in there. It's too big. Just for fun sake. Are you using these bent tools? I'm not overhead. I use these curved tools, whether this is just a scraper basically up here. This bent part needs to be in front of the tool rest at all times. Otherwise, it will just grab it and flop it right over. And a small piece like this, and we could be looking for big trouble right off the bat. But it does a pretty nice job because it is a very sort of a fine scraper. It's not a negative rig scraper, although I have it tilted over a little bit. So it's definitely going in at a negative angle. This needs to go straight in behind this shoulder before I curve, which is what I'm checking on. I can soften that edge up later or when I'm done hollowing. Maybe move my tool rest over a little bit. I don't want to drop off the edge of the tool rest. But I would like to get the whole way down into the very bottom. I don't necessarily try and make these real thin. This is probably 3/8 of an inch thick there, somewhere thereabouts. It's also very hard to actually tell how thick it is, but I don't, I do not try and do that. I do have a hump across the middle, so I need to get back in there in the very dead center and get underneath that hump and get rid of that hump. And then we'll try and clean that out a little bit better dust-wise. Because the other problem with these is it's hard to sand in there. So then a little scraping tool, or even like what I would normally use would be
something like this guy here. It's basically a hollowing tool. It's a negative rake scraper. I could go in there, I could have done all that with this. Just a different tool. Since I had the hollowing stuff right handy, and went for that. Now the hard part will be the very absolute center. What I'm doing is I'm dropping below the center. And I'm coming up. What I'm doing, if the center point was up here, like at my fingernail, I go below it and then just rotate the tool up through center. And that generally will get rid of the center point. But we didn't get quite all of it. I still didn't get rid of all of it. I can faithfully say I have not mastered. This is a Trent Bosch one. And he can get that center point like nobody's business, but he does it all the time. So I'm more interested in being a cheater, and I have other means to get that center point. I'll just go back to a normal negative rake scraper, and I will just, this needs to be cutting on center. Bring my tool rest out. And now I can drop. Yeah, looks like it's centered. I'm going to slow the speed down just a little bit. It's kind of a fair amount of tool hanging over. I still didn't get it. I can see a ring around it. It means I know I didn't get it. Another one of them things where you really can't see it. You have to feel for it. And you know when you get on the other side of center, because then it wants to lift the tool up. And we're successful in making it worse with that one. So do we have an edge on this one? This one will actually cut up in there. There's a burr on it, so I need to go up a little bit. I went a little too much. By George, I think we're going. Now all that playing around, I got to go out. What I've done, I've got to cross the center, but now when I come out here to this edge, now I left a ridge there. So this one will clean it up just as easy as anything else. Once again, it's going to be feel versus seeing. So it's a very light touch. I'm not trying to remove tons of material. I'm just trying to refine that corner. And that feels pretty good. Now we get to sand. I'm going to take the whole thing off so I can spin it upside down and try and get as much of that dust out of there that I can sand. Definitely could be a whole lot thinner, but I'm not gonna continue to mess with that. One of them deals of don't mess with things that you don't have to. And like I say, this is actually a donation piece. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to finish it to the best of my ability, but I'm also not going to spend a ton and a half of time like there on the inside to try and make it real thin. Just make it that it is hollow. Now probably the worst part about it, instead of folding this paper in half this time, I'll fold it in thirds. It's going to give me something to hold on to. I folded, normally would fold that just in half. This way I'll fold it in thirds. That way when I push, you keep my finger back, and I push in down towards the center, this will go up over the center and sand the center for me. A lot of people really don't like to stick their fingers inside of something like this. There's some stuff, I've seen some people make some stuff to hold that. First order of business is I'm going to get rid of those two razor blade edges right there. And I'm not really worried about this part out here on the very edge, especially now this is 180 grit paper. Just interested in getting the sides as best as I possibly can, the sides and the center. And I'll make that transition point down there a little bit better. I'll grab a paper towel. Paper towel will be the easiest thing I have to get in here and clean out that dust. As you can see, the paper towel doesn't really like to even cooperate in there. So we'll just run through the entire span of normal sandpaper grits that I will use. So we started at 180, we'll finish at 800. And it won't take a ton of time. Or at least it's not going to take a ton of time. The real trouble spots will be right in here, right in this area right here, underneath the lid, underneath where the lid is at, because that's pure end grain sticking out on the inside of that box right there. So that's the place that I'm always after. Is anybody going to stick their finger in? That's what they're going to do. Is they're going to take their finger and run it around there. It's like, oh, it is smooth in there. That's what you call too many years of wood turning and sort of, I guess you'd say, judging other people's work or have somebody else judge your work. And that's one of the things they would tell you that's like if you did hollow forms or something like that, somebody's always going to stick their finger in to see how smooth it is and how far down it's smooth. That was 400. Two more to go. And 600, I'm going to hit this just a little bit. This is probably a waste of time because we know it's too tight. Also, why you use the paper towel to do any of that kind of stuff. As you can see, it's never wrapped around my finger, for one. It's always folded up and my finger will be on top of it. So if it gets a hold of something in there, it just pulls it out of your hand. Never a good place to use a rag of any kind. So now we can finish the inside. Once again, we're back to the same 3460.
folded paper towel up nice and small, just like we did with our sandpaper, because we've got to stick our fingers in there again. I'll slow the speed down to pretty much nothing. Slow as it'll run on this particular belt. Once again, the 3460, the Parfix CA, of which I am a distributor of. This I'm going to really cheat because it's not going to fly away from me. I just squirted a nice amount in there, and I'll just work it in. And I can take a peek and see whether I got it all. If we don't know, we'll put a little bit more in there. So that's now our inside finished. As before, we're going to wipe off the excess. Which there'll be very little excess in this. Like I say, this stuff is like a sponge. Accelerate it. I'm still probably 10 or 12 inches or more away from it. I just want to get a little bit inside. I can even take the paper towel from there and make sure, rub it around, help it go a little bit quicker yet. Now we get to bounce back to the lid. Put that off to the side. Put our lid back in. And we're going to polish the inside of the lid. Because there's only one time to do this, and that's before you continue on. The outside of this piece will get buffed. Well, actually, it'll probably get both. I found that this stuff here is really works nicely to do both. A little bit of the abrasive paste, as well as buffing it after that. The abrasive paste, run a couple hundred RPMs. Work it in good. A clean bit of paper towel, and I probably just about doubled the speed. I was at about 600 while I was doing the other one. Now I'm about 1,000 or a little better. Melts the bees, because there's beeswax in this stuff, so it's what I'm doing now is melting the beeswax. And your fingers, if you push hard enough, you can get your fingers to be quite warm. But it does a nice simple job. As you can see, it's a nice shine to it. This outside rim I'll be able to buff. It's really mainly the interior part in there. And then we didn't put any super glue on our tenant. So now we'll go back to that. See if we can get it back in the same place where we had it at. Should be able to. It made very deep marks in there. So that should be running true enough. A little bit of run out, you'll never know the difference. So now we can put our lid in and see. You see what I mean about hollowing something? All I touched was a little bit there with 600 paper. This lid now slides on and off with ease. So now it's going to be too loose, of course. So paper towels are 2-ply, at least the ones I buy. Now you got to get the fat fingers to try and get them apart. That should be all I need. One layer of paper towel in there. Probably not totally tight enough to turn without the tailstock. We'll do a little bit without the tailstock, but a tiny bit of pressure from the tailstock will keep it in place until we absolutely have to release it. I don't even drive the point the whole way back in, because if it comes loose, it really doesn't make any difference. Now let's go back to, I'll tell you what, let's do both, because there'll be a little bit of both to see. All the work happening up there. There we go. Let's go back. We'll go back to our spindle gouge. Now I will go back to my 3/8 spindle gouge. Make sure we're at center, because we will eventually need to get to center. If we change things, we'll slow things down a little bit. And we'll bring it back up to turning speed. And we'll start by getting rid of the corner. And I'm not trying to pick up the cut on that sharp edge. I'm actually going behind that sharp edge to pick up the cut. And I want my lid to sort of be about the same. I gotta watch, because if I touch that, it will slice you like a knife. I want that diameter to sort of be about the same diameter as the fat point down there, which my eye says I'm a little bit above that. So just gave it just a tiny little flat. And we'll make a dome. So right down close to our live center. And we'll stop and take a look. If it did have the point, we probably will have to take a little bit more out of that point down there. So at this point, now is when you can send it flying. If I send it flying, it's going to go straight up into the dust collector, of course. But I'm going to come in straight in from the end, and it's still be a little bugger. Might have to use a full thickness of paper towel. Whoop. That should work. I was being a little aggressive too. That didn't help. Now it should stay on. At least it didn't walk through the dust collector. Make sure I got rid of the entire point mark.
And it looks like I did. So that's wonderful. But since it is end grain, it will enjoy its to be use a scraper on it. Actually, I should use rather than using a negative rake, I'll use a traditional scraper. It will actually even do a better job. I just have to switch over to that one. The traditional scrapers are, this is something sort of new to me, and that's because of watching Richard Rassin. I gotta get rid of this live center because I will stick myself with it slightly too high. You want to cut right on center, go in between that dummy, just on a slight downward angle. And now once again, we'll find out whether it's going to stay in there for me. As you can see, it's just like a fine dust. It's almost like sanding with like 100 grit sandpaper. The other downfall of this stuff likes to chip. That I will have to recut a little bit. It's going to get rounded over anyhow, somewhat. And there's still a little bit left. Wait a minute. Hold that thought. A lot of it has to do with which direction you're cutting. When I was cutting on the end, I was pushing directly into the headstock. Now I'm no longer pushing into the headstock. I'm trying to push it off. So wood with a piece of felt on the or a piece of leather on the end, just so that it can't go off, can't yank it off of there. And then we'll just recut that a little bit. And that should be good. Not a razor blade. Well, it's still pretty sharp. That's actually probably still sharp enough to cut you. So once again, we're back to sanding. And I'll open my sandpaper back up and fold it just in half. More flexible. Bring our speed down. That's 600 or 700 RPMs on something of this size. And I'll be gentle on this side. Once again, I'm trying to pull it back off the base. Round over that edge. Not super round, but want the details to still be crisp and clean. better habit to get into is to use that paper towel rather than your hand. You'll find out in a big hurry as to where there might have still been a sharp edge. If I use the cut part of the sandpaper, like this edge down here, this edge, even along that long edge, it'll allow me to get down into that groove, down into the base of that little bead without making it a round in there. Because if I was to use this part of the sandpaper down there, that tries to make that round in there. But it's not try, it will make it round. And that's not what I'm looking for. I want it to be crisp and clean. No big round over. So we're up to 400. A little bit of random orbit sanding at 600. It's more interested. It looked like there was there's still a tiny little bit of a hint of a white spot in the center, but I don't think I left enough. I don't imagine there's enough room on the inside. I could take a look at that maybe. Could actually put a little knob on the top of this, some sort of little black knob or something. Might look kind of interesting. Probably going to be it's going to be a future one. I don't have all night to play around making a knob to go with this yet. And 800, we're going to do the same thing on the top, little random orbit. Because remember, we've sanded circular scratches the whole way around this thing. And those scratches are very concentric. So they don't show up until you put a nice shiny finish on something. And then it's kind of a real pain in the ass to go back after something like that. So the 30 seconds or whatever it took to do just that little bit. We're going to wipe off the dust. Check it nice and smooth. Get that, we'll finish the outside here. And have some farting around time here. I'm going to turn the dust collector off. Keep saying I'm going to buy the remote for that one of these days. The real problem lies is I think they're a little overpriced. Because actually that's a jet dust collector. It is new, pretty new, a couple months old. That remote control for it from them is $100. Like $95, and I'm sure it'll be over $100 till you get it shipped to you. Once again, we're back to the 3460. Bottle is just about empty. Trying not to get too much slopped up over the edge of the bead, just enough to cover what I didn't cover earlier. I definitely don't want to get it up over the edge too far, because that is a paper towel. It would absorb it, and then we'd have a lidded box that the lid doesn't come off. And I don't think we really want to do that tonight. Every last little bit. That's kind of the wonders of using the Parfix CA as a finish for your turnings, is you get to use the whole container. You know, how many times can you say that if you were using a traditional, whatever, oil-based or even water-based finishes in the quart cans or whatever size you may buy, you never get to use the whole thing. That always sort of irritated me. It'll always go bad unless you're somebody that's doing production kind of work or something that you would use, you know, a gallon of it or something like that every month. Whereas the super glue finishing like this, I use the entire bottle. I mean, granted, mine may not last me more than a month, but it's good for a very long period of time. And the other one, the 3408, comes in 8-ounce bottles as well. So that's even better yet. That makes it that even makes it cheaper to use. A little cheaper by the ounce that way. And I leave the 8-ounce bottle stays in the refrigerator. And I work out of, just keep refilling my same 2-ounce bottle until it totally gets disgusting. And I try and keep it wiped off, but, you know, you can't always be perfect about everything. Once again, we'll give it an accelerator, hit it twice, maybe 3 times, come up there. Can even wipe it around a little bit with the paper towel. Grab a hold of it with my glove. I won't grab that with my bare hand by virtue of your hands have moisture in them. I'll sit that off to the side. Now, that actually fit on there. Brain's thinking. And we'll be all right. Just do this last little bit up here once we get there by hand. We don't need it to spin because we're going to make a jam chuck to be able to finish off this bottom. And could I be that lucky? Oh, sweet. Leftover bit from another project. Actually, we might not be able to. I might have to switch jaws. Or switch jaws. Nope. No. The reason I say no is because when the jaws get open that far, and we're going to be messing around down here or whatever, these are now sticking out beyond the jaws, the corners. So you'd have a meat grinder going at whatever, 1500 RPM, something like that, 2000 RPMs. It would not go well. I'm not going to change jaws on this chuck. I'm pretty sure I know which chuck I used this chuck, different size jaws, but I'm pretty sure my bigger chuck will allow me to grab a hold of it just fine and dandy. Of course, it may make a liar. Now it's going to work. Gotta get the right size key. Now we go back into our exercise of making a recess to match the tenon. Because this is what we're going to do. We're going to make this go into there nice and snugly. I'll still bring the tailstock up, and then we can finish this entire bottom. I probably could have sanded that part up there, but I'll show you. There's always a way around some things. Leave that in for the moment.
This is basically a waste block from a previous project, which I save a bunch of them. And now we need to go back to our recess tool. Kind of the downfall a little bit of having multiple tools of certain things. Now, where did I lay it at? Better question. Put it away, didn't I? Yeah. But it still only takes a couple seconds to change the tool to a different handle. Once again, at center. That it. Right there should do it. I don't need to get rid of any of that in there. I just need the outside, this outside to be big, small, or yeah, the right size to go over that. Close, but no cigar. It will most likely end up being the same as I just did for the other one, where it's a paper towel, which is a-okay. I'm not proud. I don't really care if I have to use a paper towel. I'd almost rather use the paper towel and be able to get that fit in there snugly, but not too snug. Because you can break these. I have broken the rim on these already. Because you get the over rambunctious like right there. That's just a shade, a very small shade too tight. I'm sure I could have actually smacked it on there. Like I said, I've broken one of them already. And then that becomes a whole nother challenge to replace just the rim on something like that. Getting tighter as it goes back, so that means I'm not straight, usually. And I do have to get it back off. And I'm thinking a very minuscule amount. So there we go. Tight, but I can still get it back off. That's the important part. So before I go any further there, and then the next kind of little hurdle will be I'll be able to get in there and sand that. So I might as well take this and make it a little bit of a toe to that point. Can even undercut that a little bit, so that's less pressure yet that it puts on that edge of that. Make sure there's no dust and no fuzzies in there. Now that I did that, that's what I thought I was going to do. I got to cut it just a little bit deeper down the side, because what I want is this shoulder here to line up with this, and not this lining up at the bottom.
So we will just take a tiny bit out of the bottom. Right smack into that corner.
It's still a little bit too tight. May seem like a lot of farting around just to do a little bit, but it's to me it's worth the effort, because now I have total access to the whole thing. I have seen people just grab a hold of that rim with the chuck or something like that, but then you damage that rim. Just this is just a little bit easier, better way to do it. I think it's the way I was taught originally to do them. So we'll put a little bit of tailstock pressure on it. Should run nice and true, which it does. So now we can finish up our shape. We'll be able to finish our shape, sand it, finish the bottom. We'll actually be able to finish this whole entire outside, finish included. And we can always step back and kind of eyeball our shape. Like I said earlier, if you don't like something earlier, I still have total access to the entire outside of this piece. So if I don't like something, which I don't necessarily love the curve down here, I can go back and recut it a little bit, because we know when we hollow the inside that this is not paper thin. So there's no worries about taking a little bit more material off of the outside here. One thing we do have to look at, I can never get a hold of my ruler, make sure we have this undercut, which we do not. So we'll get that right. We'll turn the dust collector back on. We'll sand the outside of this. Then our last step will be to remove that little nub and finish sanding the bottom. And then we will actually put finish on. And we will be done with our pinky. So we'll go back to our dust collection. So this stuff is kind of nasty to work with as far as to cut. It's, like I say, it's very dusty. Well, the sanding dust is even worse yet. It's like choking. Slow our speed down. The sanding spindle work is very easy, because you can get half of this sheet of sandpaper on the piece of wood at one time. So the sanding is much quicker. Downfall of having the bigger chuck is I already bumped my knuckle into the side of the chuck. But the jaws are closed far enough that they don't have the meat grinder part sticking out.
what I'm looking for is to make sure there's no disturbed or torn grain, which there's not. So we can just basically run through the grits from here. The 600, I'm going to sneak in there and knock that little sharp edge off right there. Same way on the very bottom here. Of course, the bottom I can hit a little bit. I'll hit that when I do the very base of it. And lastly, 800. And sort of inspect before we move on. Just like the lid, I'm going to do a little random orbit sanding on this. Just a good habit to get into. This is also 800 grit paper that I'm doing that with. It sort of, in some ways, sort of scuffs up the grain, scuffs up the surface a little bit, allows the finish to absorb in there easier and more so. Now we get to find out whether our jam fit is tight enough, which I'm pretty sure this one is probably more than tight enough. But it never surprises me if they pop off. It would just be less aggressive. Because I am cutting into end grain now. So I'm taking them maybe a 32nd of an inch at a time. Just real gentle. Because we will have to go back across the grain. This is generally where if it's going to pop it loose, it's going to pop it loose when you do this. So we'll go nice and slow. Let the tool do the cutting. Actually feels like it needs a little bit of, yeah, a little bit more out of the center. Now we could, if we were so minded, and we may just do that. Once again, we could hit this with a scraper. Of course, I took the one that I would normally use back out of the handle, or use the negative rake one. That is pure end grain. So that means it will love a scraper. Still have a divot in the middle, or a hump in the middle though. That's good. Back to our sanding, as usual. You can see a definite ring in the middle. The middle is hardly moving, so it's almost better off. This is 320. So I'm going to do a little sort of, I don't know, you're going to call it random orbits, hand sanding across the center. You could do that, really could do that with every grit. I'm generally too lazy to do it with every one. I'm going to do it with one of the coarser ones just to get rid of that white ring. Oh, the white ring is coming right back. We can also sand directly across the center. Same as before, a little random orbit. And at the random orbit node, I'm going to clean off this, break this little edge right here. It's not super, super sharp, but it's definitely sharp enough. I guess that actually should have the old trusty initials on there. And I know the Sharpie will bleed, I think. I don't think my wifey gave me one of the archival pens. I think this one is just going to get the Sharpie. I really haven't tried to see what happens with the Sharpies. Once again, if I screw it up, I still have the jam chuck. I could still put this back on the jam chuck and cut it back off. If it doesn't, if the pen bleeds because of the super glue, I could still go back after it. So all I want to do is put my initials on the bottom. It's very simple. And that's all I would have done with the pyrography pen. But I know the pyrography is much more permanent than what this probably will be. One last thing to finish, and we'll have a completed project. In what, 2 hours and 20 minutes. I will have probably another 10 minutes, 15 at tops, to buff this, but that will wait till another day this week. Won't be tomorrow, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, who knows? It could be late, much later in the week as far as that goes. Once again, we'll go down to super slow speed. This time I'm going to fold the paper towel over a little bit. I will get plenty on the paper towel because I have no way of splattering it on there. Cool. Did not make that marker run. It's not a Sharpie marker. That was some sort of marker that my wife got somewhere. Doing it this way, I can literally dribble it on the top, the paper towels underneath, and I'll get a nice thick coat on this because it's what I want. I just don't want it to run down over that rim up there and adhere the thing to the base or the jam chuck. Be hard to see
hard to see on the camera, but what I'm looking for and the reason I'm still putting more on, I could still see dry spots. Like I say, this Spectre ply is interesting stuff to work with, but it is a sponge when it comes to putting any kind of finish on it. And it does still stick to your fingers. It is still super glue. Just really, that was a brand new glove. Was, keyword was. I should be smart enough to use my own recommendations and put a little, I could have taken and put a little bit of wax on my finger, a little bit of paste wax, and it would stop the super glue from sticking to the glove. I would do the same thing on my fingers, but it's more fun to stick it fast to your fingers. So what we're doing is drying it off. Want the surface to be dry, or at least appear to be dry. I want to get the excess off the surface. More better terminology. And that's it. You really can't, you can see a tiny little dark spot right there. That's would be super glue. It's kind of the other downfall of this stuff. You put that much on it, and there's a lot of end grain. It soaks it into the end grain, but then you come back in a couple minutes or whatever, and it's kind of, some of it wants to seep back out. Dang, this stuff is nasty to work with. Not the super glue, the wood. This super glue has zero odor, so it's not that. It's the dust off of this Spectre ply. Be right back. Gotta get a glove. If I grab it with my fingers, that's when I know I will pull some of it out of the grain, because it'll be attracted to the moisture in your hands. So this way, the gloved hand is the golden hand, so to speak. Because I know I have to put a fair amount of force on it to get it out. So the only thing left to do, I'll show you what it looks like complete, or with the lid on first, and then I'm going to put a coat of finish on that yet. So there's our little pink box. See if I can get the grain in the right orientation. Probably that side. Ooh, don't touch it with your bare fingers. It feels sticky. So that's what our little, I guess I should put it right about there. Or over there. Looks better probably over there. It's a better camera. The dust hose wasn't so much in the room. Oh, that way. So that's our little lidded box. Like I say, it will get it will get buffed, and it'll bring it up to a nice high shine. I am on Instagram, so if you're so minded and follow it, Instagram is under Kapps Kreations. I usually try, keyword try, and remember to post what I have made and completed. I will definitely try to do this. It'll be a little advertisement for the folks that are running the craft show next weekend. Now that I put super glue on there, let's go strictly overhead. And if I hold, well, I can bring, this will be easier. Yeah, okay, it's dry enough. So I'll just go around this rim.
I've already put the super glue on the paper towel. Need to get a little bit more. I'm trying to keep it right on the, basically right on the last quarter of an inch or so of the paper towel. Challenging as it may be. And try and get in there on that groove the best that I can. And grain. Let it soak in just a little bit. I don't want to let it soak in too terribly much because I know I ran some out over the edge out here somewhere. Not that that's a super big deal, but I guarantee you that it already set up, which it did. Just causes me just a tiny bit of extra work because what I'll have to do, and I wait till that is totally cured, but there's really looks like only one place, like right in here, about an inch or two of it. I ran a little bit of the super glue over this. This had an accelerator on, so that immediately set up. Gosh, stuff's nasty. Makes you cough. That's why, that's like I say, that's why the dust collector's running. I've been doing a bunch of work with this stuff, and I can't come down here and work without the, no, don't do that. So this gets left sit. Like I say, another day this week. Definitely not on a Sunday. Sunday's my long day at work, and I do work Sunday. So that's a lidded box in a nutshell. They are not a huge seller at a craft show, but they do sell somewhat. They have to be pretty because the person buying them at a craft show, of course, 90% of what somebody's going to buy at a craft show is going to be a female. So they could be a little, if you wanted to, if you were a young person or whatever, maybe, and were looking to buy a diamond for that special girl or whatever. They might want a small one. That one there would be a little bit big for a ring box, but you can make them much smaller. Once again, that little scrap piece, and you say, well, scrap. You might as well keep it because it already has a recess in it. Like I say, I have it's a whole big box full of them. That's pretty much all I have. What time is it? It's 8:30. You know what? There is one other thing I would like to do. I don't even need to put them away. I made a little itty bitty bowl last night out of some wood that has been around here for years. I'm not even totally 100% sure what it is, but it has these really odd sort of pattern to it. So more dust collector work, but which draws. I did that with the big ones. And I did this one, I think last evening. Had a little bit of time left over. And I'm like, I just wanted to see what this stuff was going to look like when you turned it. So, and it's a very small log. It's only, I don't know, maybe 8 inches in diameter, something like that. So it's not big. Overall, this is 4 1/4, maybe 4 3/8. So, which I have the 2 3/8 on there. That should work. Just need the sandpaper for that one. I was really curious to actually
You know what curiosity did? It, killed the cat, but curiosity gets the best of you, and you want to see what this is going to look like with a clear finish on it. So we'll give it a quick sand. And since we're going to be sanding on the inside, even though the hose is kind of partially in the road, what I could do, zoomed in pretty far, so let's back that up just a shade. Be a little better. And back to the dust collector too.
Once again, 600 RPMs. Grid is 120, which is pretty much where I start at, power sanding stuff. Sometimes I get creative and start at 150. And probably half the time then you end up regretting starting at 150 because there'll be something that you miss that would have quickly and easily be taken off with a little bit coarser grit. I knew, like right up in here, this sort of has an undercut rim. This sanding disc is actually probably a little bit too big for this, but we're going to make it work. Even though it may actually just reshape this a little bit, which is fine too. But I will get up underneath that rim and make it really easy. Do the outside of this rim, just make it round. This stuff has a couple little places, and it is end grain, of course. It just didn't, like nothing I could do to it would make it cut cleanly. So maybe a little hand sanding just in that very little edge on that corner. See if that gets rid of it or not. Starting to. Or should I not be so lazy? I'm not sure that'll work either. The current sanding disc is 2 3/8 with the soft pad on it. I really don't have a soft pad for the 2-inch one, or maybe I do. And since I have both, so I might as well give it a try. And try it without the soft pad on it first. Thank you for the follow there, Game Silly. That one got into the corner a little bit better, but it's also still really the wrong, radius for that corner. You know, I think I'm just going to let that alone. There's a little bit of disturbed grain in there. I'm not going to get that super fussy with this one. I just want to be able to put a little bit of put some finish on to be able to take it Tuesday nights or turning club meeting. And hopefully one of the forestry guys is there and can actually answer me the question as to what kind of wood this really is. We're cleaning off the dirt each time between each grit. Most interested in getting rid of any little bits of the previous grit that may be left behind. If I don't, it'll just sink in more yet into the grit. So that's 400. That's through 400. At this point, I could have actually sanded a good bit of the outside here too. We can do that in reverse, so the stuff goes away from me. Well, at least you up here around this rim. But I do not have a center point on the back of this or on the foot, because the foot's already done. Here's where it'd be probably more advantageous to actually switch back to the other pad. But this is already cut nice and clean, so there's not any places underneath that rim on the inside. That was not being quite cooperative. That's kind of the inside ready, ready for a finish. I think that's maybe what I'll do, and I'll call it quits at that. Because I just put the finish on the inside. Like I say, the curiosity factor of, what is it going to look like when you put a clear finish on it?
And then we'll finish it another day. What I'll do is probably we'll cheat in a very big way by virtue of I have the cheating capabilities. This will be a vacuum chuck. Hopefully it'll go inside of that. It should. Yeah, it'll go the whole way in. I'll pull a vacuum on it, and I'll be able to finish sanding that, and then release the vacuum and finish the bottom off of it. Finish the outside, rather. I can't have a vacuum then put that thin super glue on the outside of something. It will be on the inside very quickly. And that's not my experience talking. That's a friend of mine from Hawaii that did it on a very expensive vacuum chuck, no less. He was fortunate that he realized what he did and took the piece off quick enough. I think that particular kind has a rubber gasket on it. I think he did ruin the rubber gasket, which he said wasn't super expensive, but always mistakes to be made and lessons to be learned and all that good stuff. Back to our typical, this will be the 3408 in the Parfix. What I was using on the Spectre ply was the 3460. Difference is the 3408 is actually thinner than the 3460. And this is only strictly one coat and done. Dust collector hose out of the road. What I've done is taken a paper towel. This time I put a little, like 3/4 inch or 1 inch square of polyester felt in there. It's going to act as a kind of reservoir for me. This time I'm going to be extra smart since I'm thinking of it. Get my little can of microcrystalline wax. Put a little bit on my fingers. My thumb and my 3 fingers, because that's basically what I'm going to use. The only problem with doing this is I cannot touch. You got to remember you put that on there. So I already had the pad made up, which is a good plus. So now the super glue does not stick to wax. They're not friendly together. It is kind of interesting looking. It's always fun to work with things you have no idea really what they are. At least in our case, there's 2 guys in our local wood turning club, one of which is 90 years old and a retired forester. He is very good with identifying what kind of wood it is. And there's also another one is associated with the forestry people, and he himself is very good with identifying the woods. That one there generally needs a piece of the bark or the complete log or something or other to be able to definitely 100% be sure of what kind of wood it is. It definitely has a interesting grain to it. All right. Well, that is where we're going to quit. Curiosity killed the cat, so now we have that kind of ready to go. Maybe Monday evening when I come home from work, I'll try and finish it up so I can take it Tuesday. But other than that, going to be it for me. Go see if we can find somebody else to raid into. See if there's anybody on this evening. No. Wait, nobody likes Saturday nights. But this is now my sort of typical, would be to be here on a Saturday evening. Last couple Saturdays we've had other commitments going on. I have 2 craft shows the next 2 Saturdays, so most likely we'll be here, but I can't promise you that. But thanks to follow their game, Suli. I guess that's how you would pronounce that. And anybody else that followed along, you all have a wonderful week, and we will see you hopefully next Saturday evening. And we'll try and do something